Welcome, everyone, to the Wednesday weekly ranking show here with Jim Coventry and the RotoWire Fantasy Football YouTube page. Week 4 beginning here in earnest tomorrow, and I guess maybe in earnest is not quite true because this could be a Thursday night stinker of sorts with the Seahawks and Cardinals. And frankly, it's going to be kind of a messy fantasy football week overall. We have our first overseas game here. Well, technically our second. We had the first one being in week 1 in Brazil. We have 2 Monday night football games. One that I would imagine most people don't care about, with the Dolphins and Jets. Why we can't flex that at some point is crazy to me. I understand we have to have that stuff locked in to a certain extent, but please, NFL, be smarter about scheduling these things. So it's going to be tough. And of course, major injuries to receiver. We had CeeDee Lamb, Mike Evans. The James Conner news is disappointing too. So lots to cover over on the show here for today. And of course, as always, we have Jim's rankings here up on the site. You can go ahead and see that right now. This is more or less a start sit, right? Like if somebody were to say, hey, I want to have this guy over this guy, I'm sorry, do I play Jordan Love or Justin Fields? They should be able to look at these rankings, Jim, and at least on Wednesday, have that decision made for them, correct?
Exactly. And remember the tags, for those who are new to the show, the tags, green means added upside. The ranking's good where it's at. The salmon, I'll keep going, it means added downside. So just be cognizant of that. Obviously, every player has upside and downside, but it's real important to identify that.
So I wanted to start actually on a kind of side note here with this. Somebody that's a little bit lower on your quarterback rankings that I might bump up higher would be Geno Smith, who headlined my waiver wire article on Monday as one of the top streaming quarterback options for this week. And the idea is here's the Bears defense. Sneakily, both the Raiders and Bears kind of need this game, and I would imagine whoever wins on Sunday, we're going to be discussing either one as a sneaky playoff team. Neither are, or at least certainly not the Raiders. But Geno Smith is an opportunity who's now 2 of the 3 weeks to start the season been a top 12 fantasy quarterback in traditional scoring settings. I look at this Bears defense. It was the same reason we liked Dak Prescott last week, and if not for offensive line injuries and CeeDee Lamb injuries, Prescott would have made that fantasy ranking as well too. So is Geno Smith somebody that, I mean, you only have him as 19. I actually might bump up even higher if I was doing the rankings.
Geno's tight. And again, when we get outside of like quarterback 12, it's really a big conglomeration of players that are close. But Geno, so we saw last week, 289-3. But then you go back, the Chargers were a tougher defense. The Bears aren't very good. But again, 180-0 and 3 picks. This is a guy that could have a lemon at any time. Even in the week 1 game against New England, he throws for 362, but 1 touchdown and 1 pick. So it wasn't even a big scoring game. And he doesn't run much. He had a 20-yard game. That was it. But so he's just that player. I don't want to ever put him too high because at any week, for any unknown reason, Geno could just have a bad game because that's unfortunately who he's become. He's very talented. When he's hot, he's great. But I can't predict when he's going to be hot, so it makes me really tough to rank him, Joe.
The realistic answer to this is that there's unfortunately a lot of guys lower than him that would be also streaming candidates, like Jake Browning, who I was advocating in super flex leagues and deeper quarterback leagues against the Broncos this week. The Bengals kind of need that one too, but my God, that wasn't all Jake Browning's fault against the Vikings, but that was a disaster of a game against Minnesota there, and Browning certainly didn't help things. You have guys like Carson Wentz filling in for the Vikings and JJ McCarthy. I don't really want to play Carson Wentz against the Steelers defense, even though this is not the steel curtain by any means at all in Pittsburgh this year. Spencer Rattler would be a popular one. Well, the Bills are going to be annihilating the Saints theoretically this week too. So it's just difficult. Like Geno Smith, widely available out there, and I don't mind him if you really need to kind of pivot from a different quarterback option. The other news, at least from yesterday, was Jackson Dart will be making his first official start for the Giants. That it comes this week, I thought was really interesting because the Chargers couldn't be riding any higher right now, and I think are a Super Bowl caliber team in their defeat over the Broncos on Sunday. That was the worst the Chargers have looked, and they still beat a very good, I think, Broncos team to go 3-0, now face Jackson Dart in his first professional start. I had put this in the waiver wire article, and again, you can go ahead and see this in RotoWire. YouTube 15 gets you 15% off code to the RotoWire site itself. I like Jackson Dart enough as a player, and Jim, having done these rankings now for a number of years, the young quarterbacks typically, mobility-wise, are going to give you a floor from a points perspective. It's just that you have the Chargers, Broncos, and 2 separate Eagle stints in 4 of the next 5 games for the rookie. This could not be a more difficult path for Jackson Dart to be fantasy relevant right off the rip.
It is very true. And I have his in my quarterback 32 because I am very, very concerned with this matchup. Now, there's some possibilities here because you have the Chargers playing in a cross-country trip. You have that classic look ahead game. It's all right. Well, it's the Giants. You're not going to mentally get up for it. Your coaches will say they're dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
So there are scenarios here where the Chargers don't show up. And all of a sudden we get a good Jackson Dart game. But like you're saying, objectively, the way this defense is coached from the Chargers, the way they're playing, the confusing looks they're going to give Dart, who has no experience with this. The paper matchup is so bad that I can't rank him anywhere outside of the last starting quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
But again, there's a scenario if you're in a super flex and you are going to take your dart throw. Yes. There is a world where it works.
I mean, Dart was already a raw quarterback prospect even entering the NFL draft. The Giants took him to the back end of the first round. I think says a lot about what the NFL views him as a quarterback. Remember when we were trying to talk ourselves into Malik Willis being a first rounder, the NFL said, no, he's a third rounder. And then ended up being proven correct, I think, even in that draft. It was like Kenny Pickett as the lone first rounder back into the first round. Pickett's basically out of the league, or I know he's not out, but he might as well be at this point. You're right. It does not take much of imagination to think here's a cross-country road trip for a team that thinks their fart smells super good with the Chargers. Literally happened with the Packers-Browns last week as my team completely did something in the bed. And I think that could very easily happen for a Chargers team as well, too. Even in that scenario, I don't know if Dart is like an obvious in single quarterback leagues play. And again, looking at that rest of season, looking at the immediate schedule with the Broncos and 2 Eagles matchups to come, unless you are in deeper quarterback leagues or super flex ones or 2 QB starts, that's the only scenario I'm rostering Dart outside of the Saints game here coming up. And if I give one more cross sport comparison, Jim, these are all narrative based things. And you were saying the same thing. When a new rookie pitcher comes up from AAA and makes his first professional start, often they will do well, even if that prospect pitcher isn't very good. It's because literally nobody in baseball has like tells or what the pitcher wants to do or sequences or counts. I think the same scenario applies. So I wouldn't be shocked if Dart does okay. In fact, if I have to start him over the next 5 weeks outside of the Saints game, this is probably the one game I don't mind doing so. But he is very low in my rankings. Again, I think very below Geno Smith. I mentioned below Matthew Stafford too in my article as well. So I'm only going over this direction because I think the quarterbacks otherwise are pretty lock and load if you have them. But if we're talking about new changing information, Geno Smith is a streaming candidate this week. Jackson Dart making his first professional start. There you go with that. So let's go to my Packers because I thought Jordan Love would be an okay fantasy quarterback. I think we both had him as low-end quarterback 1 last week.
Right.
Could not have looked worse against the Browns, predictably. I tweeted after the fact, I should have known this. I don't know why I let myself believe that this team would be any different than the past 2 decades of McCarthy's and LaFleur's who let their teams completely roll over against inferior competition. This happens all the time. This was a perfect example of it week 3. I'm not trying to think too much into the future about the Packers, but this week, I have a little bit of that stink still on me. I know the Cowboys defense is absolutely horrendous, but the way you beat the Cowboys defense is typically like we saw in the Giants game a couple weeks ago. Wan'Dale Robinson, run 50 yards down the field. Malik Neighbors, run 50 yards down the field. The Packers don't have that sort of receiver, or at least they're not using him like that in Matthew Golden. So is Jordan Love an actually obvious play this week against this Cowboys defense?
There is a narrative here. He's quarterback 9 because, look, a lot of the quarterbacks stink this year. So, I mean, he's there. And if LaFleur wants to get Love back on track after last week's game against the great Cleveland defense, he can easily set this up. He can set this up so Love throws for 300 yards. He can set up 3 throws for 3 touchdowns. But alternate universe. Offensive line's really banged up. Not sure what that's going to be, and that's hurting Josh Jacobs too. But they still could run Josh Jacobs. They could get out to a big lead early, and they might not have to throw. So there's a bunch of alternate realities here. Love is a very good play. But if they get out to a 14-0 lead early and it's on the back of Josh Jacobs, they may take the air out of the ball. You may see Love throw the ball 17 times. So you have to be careful with Jordan Love, knowing there's a ton of upside. And it's possible Dallas doesn't score many points.
Right.
And if that's the case, we do not have a shootout. Dallas is down 2 interior offensive linemen, the center and the right guard. That's a problem because now they're facing Micah Parsons. Guess where he's going to be rushing from? The middle a lot. I know that's going to happen. And that's going to be devastating for Dallas.
Yeah, I think the Packers win. I'll have my picks against the spread and totals up on the site probably later in the afternoon, evening today. I think the Packers will win. I just have a little bit of concern that it seems like this should be the gimmiest of all gimmies for Jordan Love and company. And it's not the way that I would exploit the Cowboys defense, the way the Packers typically do things. It's more methodical. You have guys like Dobbs who can make third down receptions and things like that. It's not deep over the middle and big plays. We'll have to see. I'm hoping for better news. It can't be much worse than what I've ever watched against the Browns last week as a Packer fan. The other quarterback matchup that I at least am debating in my leagues, and I imagine a lot of other people are as well too, is Baker Mayfield going against the Eagles. Now, the Buccaneers as a team actually own Philadelphia. I think back to the playoff game 3 or 4 years ago where the Buccaneers were by no means a actually good team, ended up beating the Eagles, I think in Philadelphia, or if it was Philly on the road. But either way, that was a surprise win for the Buccaneers. And since that point forward, have been one of the lone teams to basically own the defending Super Bowl champions over the past 3 or 4 seasons. Baker Mayfield is so fun. This doesn't matter fantasy-wise, but that's the kind of leader I want on my team, fantasy or otherwise. Baker Mayfield is that kind of person. He's going to have some adverse situations here because you would assume if everyone was healthy, you could exploit Adoree Jackson. I don't know, and we'll get to this with the receivers in a little bit for the Buccaneers. I don't know what this look is going to be with Mike Evans surely sidelined for at least this week, if not longer, with a hamstring injury. Emeka Buka was already supposed to have limited snaps last week and now comes away with a bit more banged up injuries here. And of course, Chris Godwin, if he makes his debut, how much is he actually playing? Well, it's fine if you have Sterling Shepard, who could be a really good slot target, but Chris Godwin is probably a good slot target as well, too. And you would think you would want him there to start his season. I don't know what the Buccaneers will do passing-wise, and it makes me just a little bit nervous to play him.
You know, the thing with Mayfield is this dude runs now. I think it's at least 30 yards in each game. He had a 44 in there. That rushing floor, because Philly's going to come and he is going to run. I mean, don't be surprised if he runs for 40 yards here again. But the problem is I have a downside tag on him because he's down 2 linemen for sure. Right tackle Gadecki's out. One of the guards is down for almost the season, if not the whole season. And we don't know if Tristan Wirfs going to play. So he hasn't played all year. They keep saying he's close, but he hasn't been on the field. So this could be a disaster. And again, like you said, no Mike Evans. We don't know what Godwin will be. You mentioned that as well. So it's a problem. So there is a ton of downside for Baker here. If you have a solid option as a quarterback too, I think we say forget the downside and just put somebody else in. But the thing we've learned about Baker, and Joe, you heard me harping all off season. Liam Cohen might have helped Mayfield, but Mayfield was not a bad quarterback. He's a good quarterback, and you're seeing it this year. That dude makes plays. So you rank him there, but that downside tag is very real. I'm nervous to start him.
So Baker, you have his quarterback 6. Somebody in the chat asked Drake May, which I think is a comparable sort of player. Again, like Dak Prescott against the Packers defense. I wouldn't go that direction. Jared Goff against the Browns defense. That makes me a bit queasy. But so May feels like the threshold where I'd make, maybe against the Panthers. May also runs to when you are setting these rankings, and especially with the different colors, salmon or auburn, whatever you want to call it, as well as green, that like, this is Jim saying I would play Baker Mayfield over Caleb Williams, over Daniel Jones, or is it Jim saying, man, I don't mind it if I have 15 leagues like Joe's playing in, and he's a psycho like that, maybe we'd switch him around every once in a while. Like, is Baker over Drake May the automatic start every week?
So not necessarily, especially with the injuries in the Buccaneers right now. And that's the downside tag. The downside tag is important. And when you're managing your fantasy teams, I think it's important to understand that. When you're going into a game and you're looking at the risk factor on your roster, if you see you have multiple risk factors at different positions on your team, take the player with the upside because you might need it that week. But if you're like a favorite in your game, then I don't take chances. Then you take the quarterback 6 Mayfield and you say, you know what, there is downside, but I have a solid roster across the board. I'm probably a solid favorite in my game. So I'm going to play him knowing he'll get me a baseline of points, even in a bad scenario where even though Drake May's been getting it done, this one, like I might have ranked him higher, but this is a game where if they can actually not fumble the ball in their backfield, maybe this is a game where New England can run the ball, play with the lead, and not throw a lot. So there's other scenarios there too. But yeah, I think again, if you're a favorite, you take the higher ranked guy. If you need some variance, you take the guy with the upside.
Well, I think it's a perfect transition over to the running back position. And again, you can see Jim's rankings right there. Otherwise, hop on with Jim on YouTube Sunday mornings, who will actually go over all the start set questions that you might have here. He does a fantastic job. It feels like 15 hours for Jim doing that. I think it's only like 2 on Sundays, but he goes through every single question as best he can. He's been fantastic all year and will continue to do so. So the running backs, last week, we were hand-wringing about the rookie running backs, Marion Hampton and Travion Henderson and Ashton Genty and R.J. Hart. Well, basically everyone got a course corrected within 1 week, which is fantastic if you had those players rostered. Unfortunate issue, at least Marin Hampton, is Najee Harris done for the season. Trayvon Henderson had to have both Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson fumble to get more playing time, and even then, he wasn't fantastic with that. So in your mind, let's go through this. Like, Marin Hampton now, rest of season, is he, if we were to do a redraft today, is he a first-round pick overall?
Oh, first round is actually tough because he did well as a receiver. His rushing still was not efficient, but we say it every show, Joe. Volume is king in fantasy football. I say definitely a second round pick because there are players that have been bad that you're not going to take, like Derrick Henry. May have had 2 rough games, but you're taking Derrick Henry before Omarion Hampton. And so, and even at this point, do you take Quinshon Judkins over Omarion Hampton?
Yeah.
So I would say second round pick based on the knowledge that Najee Harris has done, and Hampton's going to see a boatload of volume.
We'll get to the running backs a bit more because I want to expand on this, but Tyler sent in a question for us. Really appreciate the shout out here, Tyler. This is more of a waiver wire thing, but I think it's fine when we're going over the receivers itself. So Trey Tucker, Sterling Shepard, Alec Iomanor here for the Titans. I had made the argument on the Monday podcast. I think we actually talked with Tyler in the chat, which was great. Glad to see you here as well too, Tyler. I'm not chasing the Trey Tucker explosion. Like 8 for 154 and 3 touchdowns. My co-host Jake Latarski was saying, no, this is going to be something here in the future. I watched every one of those receptions. Half of them, there wasn't a Commander player within the screen. Like, this isn't like Trey Tucker was just getting an insane amount more volume. I think it was game script that was revolved to this. But you've been doing this all year now, Jim, and of course Sterling Shepard benefiting probably with Mike Evans injured. How do you rank those 3 among guys to pick up and possibly play this week?
Iomanor is a complete player who's growing. He's not the finished product, but I think he's going to be close to that in a few weeks, and you're getting good baseline production in the short term. He is going to get better. I think you go with Iomanor because it's a long term, but let me tell you, Trey Tucker's playing 90% of the snaps every single week. That 9-target game where he went off against Washington, that was followed up by an 8-target game against the Chargers. Now, the Chargers shut him down. They shut down everybody, right? Mm-hmm. And then in week 1, he did have a long touchdown. So, but Tucker is going to be very hard to trust in the starting lineup because that 3 for 12 game he had against the Chargers, that is going to happen 5 or 6 times this year, and you are never going to know when that's going to happen. Iomanor is going to be a big part of an offense where a team is going to trail a lot. Iomanor is my choice.
I think I'm with you as well with Iomanor. And it's a tough match against the Texans this week. Cam Ward was quarterback 30 on your rankings, rightfully so. There are going to be better days ahead overall for the Titans, whether it be Kelvin Ridley, Iomanor, Cam Ward, Tony Pollard. I'm not advocating to go out and trade for any of them, but I do think if you have them on your roster, there will be better days ahead to play them. This is probably one of the more difficult starts to a number 1 overall picks career that I can recall, certainly in my time doing this now with RotoWire for the past 10 years. So Iomanor is probably the one from a safety perspective. I think you are chasing what happened last week for Trey Tucker to a certain extent, although he does need to be rostered. All right, back to the rookie running backs. And again, we had talked about Omarion Hampton in terms of his value. Trayvon Henderson, are you expecting that this was now the rock that broke the dam in this case for the Patriots offense with Antonio Gibson fumbling once, Stevenson twice in a 4-fumble game for the Patriots and that loss to the Steelers?
This is going to be a coaching decision. If I'm the coach and I didn't coach there last year, and I know that Stevenson fumbled 7 times last year, 2 critical fumbles here, Gibson fumbled as well, and Gibson's a fumbler. The coaches may just say, you know what, we can't have this happen. So maybe they just go ahead and say Henderson play, but Henderson hasn't been good. Henderson has not been a good runner. So that's their decision. Do we cut the rookie loose and just see what he can do? We just came off of Ramondre having a great game in week 2.
Right.
So the coaching staff probably, I can't speak for him, gives Stevenson one more chance. But that's going to be very tight going forward because if he puts the ball on the ground with any consistency going forward, that probably is going to change fast. I'm still nervous this week about that backfield. I ranked them both low. Stevenson running back 33, Trayvon 34. I think Gibson was getting significant touches, but maybe his fumble put him a little more on the downside.
Yeah, it's been the pass blocking issue for Trayvon Henderson. There's a bunch of clips on social media, and that seems to be the reason as to why, which is unfortunate because I was the one here touting amongst anyone else at RotoWire that Henderson was one of the best pass blocking rookie running backs we've seen in some time. That has not played out through the first month of the NFL season, but I do think that gets rectified. And frankly, I'm trusting the coaching staff, which I think is still pretty good in New England, and seeing that stuff sort of get ironed out. This week, at least from week 3, we had a number of players, I think, jump up due to injuries. I had made the case in the waiver wire article. Trey Benson is your first guy to go all out on waivers that we've had this year. Trey Benson, now with James Conner done for the season, will be as close to what I think a 3-down back can be in the NFL. Amari Hampton, kind of that same sort of purpose with the Chargers. And then also looking at Cam Scadaboo with Tyrone Tracy out for possibly a month with a dislocated shoulder. All 3 are guys that I think become basically must-starts. Let's go with Trey Benson first. Are you of the belief that Benson will now just be the runner and pass catcher just overall for the Cardinals? Or does Amari DiMercato get enough snaps where Trey Benson isn't both a PPR maven and also volume guy for the Cardinals?
This week, short week, I think Benson gets as much of the work as he can handle. DiMercato is going to get 3 to 5 touches probably, and that's probably the end of it, unless the game's a blowout one way or the other. But here's the player I'm thinking about and I'm worried about long-term. Michael Carter is on the practice squad. And we know that Michael Carter has a history of catching passes, garbage time stuff, third down back, scat back. And I could see them next week elevating him and him eventually becoming the passing down back, because with that roster spot empty, they're going to need a running back. I'm not guaranteeing that happens. If you're in a super deep league and there's like nobody in your waiver wire, he's not on an NFL roster right now because he's on the practice squad. But I take a look at Michael Carter, but Benson right now, I put him at running back 12 because I should see good volume. It's a tough matchup, but he'll be a runner and a receiver, and he definitely has big play potential.
Again, Cam Scadaboo now, I think, poised to be the starting running back. Does that matter with Jackson Dart as the quarterback for the Giants moving forward? I'm not sure. Scadaboo has impressed me. I was a little bit lower on him. I had talked about, I think, some of the personality stuff, and I didn't think it would play well in the NFL. Couldn't have been more wrong about that. But what he's done on the field, I feel like, was basically straight out of college as well, too. And now, with, I think, set to be a 3-down back, Devin Singletary will be more of a factor just sprinkled in there. I think Scadaboo also has to be in that sort of conversation as a almost lock-and-load play for this week.
Yeah, I put him at running back 25, but I definitely put the green tag on him for the upside. The Chargers matchup could be a bit of a problem. I could see that being an issue, but Scadaboo seems to be the real deal as a runner and a receiver, and I wouldn't be surprised if he ended the week as a running back 14 to 15. Would not surprise me at all, which is why he has the upside tag. If you are deciding within your starting lineup and you don't have another running back that you consider like a lock for a running back 2, I wouldn't hesitate to put Scadaboo in, because catching that ball, that is huge. And obviously big, good runner at the goal line. I love Scadaboo. His ranking each week will go up the more I see.
Right. The other one that I guess kind of got underreported here with the complete blowout due to Isaiah Rodgers single-handedly beating the Bengals, that Jordan Mason literally was a 3-down back for the Vikings. And had that game not been completely out of hand by midway through the second quarter, I think Jordan Mason probably could have an even more monster fantasy day. Even still ends up going for over 100 plus yards and those 2 touchdowns. I think it was 2, whatever. Mason was awesome. I know Xavier Scott ended up getting a bit of run in the second half. I know Cam Akers was a practice squad call up that ended up doing a little bit too in that blowout game. Jordan Mason, though, from a volume perspective alone, I feel like is also in must play territory this week and moving forward until Aaron Jones returns.
Yeah, Mason again. I put the green tag because I could see him finishing as a running back 5. My ranking's a little bit lower, but I do think he's going to do extremely well here. Pittsburgh's defense has not been good against the run. You can definitely get things going. Ryan Kelly, I would expect, is going to be back from the concussion after he missed last week. We'll see how that shakes out. But again, they have Darisaw there. So this is a team, they want to run the ball. And they probably have a lead against Pittsburgh because I don't think that Aaron Rodgers is going to be in good shape. Remember last year in London when Rodgers was with the Jets and it was brutal. And that same pressure is going to be coming here. So Mason has a chance to really finish the top 5 running back here. Again, where I have him listed, he's in auto start territory for sure. But you are starting him with confidence. And if you drafted him as your running back 3, you should consider him over the running back 2 you drafted.
Last one I'll mention for the running backs, then we'll get to more of the receivers. I know in the chat we're talking about that a little bit more, and I think it's just an overall better conversation to have for week 4. But Chase Brown was one of your guys entering this year, and frankly, Jim, you can't go 100 for 100, but you're about 97 for 100. Chase Brown's the only one that hasn't quite lived up to the expectation, and everyone else was in on Chase Brown. I felt like by mid-August, if not a little bit earlier than that too, with what we were expecting for the Bengals offense, and that there really wasn't anyone behind him. I have started to see people discuss Tajay Brooks as a pickup, or Samaje Perine as a pickup, and I think I want to push back on that. I probably will add Tajay to the waiver wire article here just to have that name out there for a lot of folks, but What is happening with the Bengals rushing attack, and can it be rectified at all with Chase Brown, or is this scenario that Jake Browning is just going to sink the ship for the Bengals?
I always talk about don't listen to what I say, listen to why. And my Chase Brown discussion, this is exactly what I said all summer. This was a constant drumbeat. I go with Joe Burrow under center, with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Defense have no choice but to put a big shell over the top to try to stop the big explosive plays. I said that Chase Brown will have free yards as a runner, free yards as a receiver in the dump-off game, and it didn't matter if the offensive line was bad because that would work. And when Burrow went down, can never predict a season-ending injury like that or close to it. So what happens is their line is awful, so nobody's going to run for them. The run blocking is atrocious. That is one of the worst lines in the league. Now with Jake Browning, it's a quick passing game. So defenses now walk everybody up. You're not worried about the big play with Chase and Higgins because Browning's not going to make that happen. So it's going to be run blitzes. It's going to be everybody staying up closer. And that means Chase Brown, all of those reasons you drafted him, none of them remain. He does not have free yards anymore. He does not have an offensive line. Everything has to be done on his own. The only thing he can hope for is a bunch of checkdowns. It was 4 for 16 last week. Now, they won't play the Vikings every week. Right. I'll definitely give them that. This week they get the Broncos. I mean, it's better, but not much better. So I have him as running back 28. He'll be a matchup-based play going forward.
Yeah. Frustrating if you ended up having him as like a top 16 pick, which I did in a bunch of different leagues as well, too. It felt like Chase Brown was very safe floor among those other guys. I liked Bucky Irving more. I liked Jonathan Taylor more. I liked Derrick Henry more. But the idea was here's a floor running back. And that's what you want over a bunch of these receivers like A.J. Brown or Terry McLaurin, I guess a little bit later on. It really has been a tough spot overall for those running backs in that, I guess really just Chase Brown for that part of things. Let's move over to the receivers. And you, Jim, had mentioned, I think earlier in the week in our individual messages to saying it's really difficult to look at the top of this receiver group and have a lot of enthusiasm. And I think it's in large part because we haven't seen, let's just say like a Rome Odunze of the world be completely justified or solidified in his fantasy value, even though I think you and I could both say he has been fantastic for the Bears thus far. And even a guy like Cortland Sutton, who in 2 to 3 weeks has been a fantasy relevant dude too. The ceiling of the receivers has been just completely chopped off. And there hasn't been enough rebuilt to say, here's the, there was 2 or 3 years ago where 7 first-round receivers, 8 first-round receivers, because we all felt really good about how much production they were generating. It's just brutal right now if you have one of those top receivers for the most part.
Joe, the rankings here, look at the 4 names at the top. Puka, Smith and Jigba, Neighbors, St. Brown. Now, those are the only 4 receivers I trust. But now with Jackson Dart, do I trust Neighbors? I don't even know that I trust him right now. So really, it's Nakua, Smith and Jigba, and St. Brown. Garrett Wilson's close. I don't trust any other receiver on the board. Rome Odunze has been great. Right. But remember, he had like 30 yards in the opener, 36, and he had the touchdowns. That was great. Last week, he got behind Dallas's defense. I love him, and he is broken out, but I don't know that he's sustainable week to week. I think there's going to be weeks where defenses start, getting in on him a little bit. Brian Thomas, come on, Ladd McConkey. Cortland Sutton week 2 was ugly. So this whole board, there is nobody on the receiver board at the top that I have any confidence they'll play the way we drafted them.
It's crazy. Jefferson being a top 3 or 4 pick, CeeDee Lamb out for a duration of time, Jamar Chase hampered by Jake Browning, tough match against the Broncos. I love Drake London this year. I don't know what you're getting from Michael Penix week to week. I mean, that's been terrifying as well. Nico Collins was one of those that we were very upset about even last week. For a position that was supposed to be safe, right? That's why we've been taking receivers over the running backs because they never get injured. They're going to have a volume part of things. You can find these running backs later on. For a position that was supposed to be safe, it has been anything but, and I think it really hamstrung you unless you took Ashton Genty, which I did in a bunch of leagues at the back end of the first round. I mean, like it's just been a brutal spot to be. I think the answer, if you're to try to kind of look over this more, the volume players, the ones that you feel very confident will be volume week to week. For example, I made the argument on Angel Fire Radio on SiriusXM, 6 to 8 p.m. Easterns on Saturdays every week. I think Jacoby Myers is one of those guys I'm trading for. And I will give up a decent asset to get Jacoby Myers because week in and week out, I know I'm getting 12 points. I might not get 30, but I know I'm getting 12 points. And my God, that really matters when I can't even get 12 points from Jamar Chase, who was the number 1 overall pick, right? I mean, like that's that, or Keenan Allen, for example, is a great one too, who was probably available on waivers for a lot of places. If you trade something of value for Keenan Allen right now, at least you're getting 12 fantasy points most weeks.
Yeah, Jacoby Myers. I mean, last week was weird. All right, so I don't know how he gets 4 targets on 93% snaps in a game that get blown out, but it was 10 and 12 targets. Like you said, you fully trust Jacoby Myers. That's a player you love. The floor, like you said, the floor is something that we're not getting out of players. Chris Olave has had no ceiling, but he has had
Correct.
floor
Perfect.
players like that.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned Keenan Allen. My gosh, I mean, Keenan Allen and Quentin Johnston.
Both.
They are both blowing away Lad McConkey. Allen's the wide receiver 6 PPR. Johnson's the wide receiver 8. McConkey sitting way down at wide receiver 43. And he's like, McConkey's not commanding targets. And the reason we loved McConkey and we drafted him, A, he's a really good player, but B, we expected he was going to continue to see heavy targets.
Right.
And I cautioned people. I said, look, I get it, but Keenan Allen, he is going to get targets here. He has a long-standing chemistry with Justin Herbert.
Yeah.
And most nobody saw the Quentin Johnson. He's a first-round pick. And if he truly has realized his potential and talent and cleaned up the drops and some of the issues, this is a first-round pick. So this, in theory, this might not be a bum.
Yeah, I mean, the Chargers are fascinating because the real-life application of Lad McConkey being basically the team's third target has made that overall offense completely dynamic. And for what was always projected to be a run-heavy team, they signed multiple offensive linemen. It's almost like they were like, oh, wait, we have literally a top 5 quarterback in all the NFL. What if we just used him like that? And Herbert has been automatic through the first 3 weeks of the season. Just, I think, one of the more spectacular quarterback plays, at least from a 3-week stretch that I can recall in my life. He has just been on fire. And that is because Quentin Johnston has emerged and actually caught passes. That is because Keenan Allen has become a weaponized third down threat and red zone guy, which, like you mentioned, oh, by the way, and I feel stupid for this one too, he did his entire time when he was healthy in Los Angeles. That doesn't just get wiped away with 1 year in Chicago. Lots of bad things can make your mind go crazy in Chicago, but you don't just become a bad receiver after 1 year there. Like it's like, gosh, I wish I would have thought that one a little bit more thoroughly too. So I'm with you. I mean, it helps the Chargers be one of the best teams in the NFL, but fantasy-wise, Lad McConkey falling to where he has been certainly frustrating. Let's talk about the other receivers here that were injured last week. Again, Mike Evans, we expect to be out for some duration time. Last year, he suffered a hamstring injury, missed 3 weeks and the bye, then came back. I assume we're talking about probably a month here for Mike Evans, if not a bit longer.
Yes.
Okay, great. Emeka Egbuka is the first-round pick. That's exactly why the Buccaneers took him, so they wouldn't be in this complete exact spot. Chris Godwin likely making his season debut, or at least we're assuming so. How many snaps is he going to play? And then Sterling Shepard has that chemistry with Baker Mayfield dating back to college, but is basically a slot specialist. And oh, by the way, wrap this up with offensive line injuries and the Eagles being a better pass rush. It's a really difficult spot for me to say, play a Godwin, play a Sterling Shepard, and yet you might have to because of all the injuries we've had and also ineffective play at the top of the receivers.
You know, in the preseason, Vic Fangio, the defensive coordinator for the Eagles, talked about using Quinyon Mitchell as a shadow corner when it needed to happen. This is a week where you might do that. Godwin clearly is coming back from an injury, so you don't expect him. An opposing team is not going to expect him to be full throttle Chris Godwin. Now, he might be, but that'd be so. In this one, no Mike Evans. I think you take Quinyon Mitchell and you say, you know what? Go ahead and take Egbuka. Let's get him out of the equation. At least slow him down. Make it real difficult for him. And now Godwin, I think Godwin's a good play this week because if he comes, this was the second surgery was a hardware repair. It wasn't a setback. So my guess is they waited till he was full go. That's my guess. So my guess is, look, you can't rank him super high, but I think Chris Godwin comes out, put him at wide receiver 36 because you got to account for something, maybe limited snaps, but I think he comes in and he performs well. And the middle of the field is a place where you can get after them. And I get it that Cooper DeJean is a good corner, but Chris Godwin, when he's functioning, it doesn't matter who's on him. And I keep going back to this. Baker Mayfield not only had chemistry last year, it goes back to Cleveland. The slot receiver, Jarvis Landry, was averaging 993 yards in the 2 seasons Baker was healthy playing with him. So I do like Godwin this week, but I'm worried. I have Egbuka ranked higher because he'll get more targets, but I don't like the matchup for him.
So going back to Tyler's question, would you play Chris Godwin over a Trey Tucker or Sterling Shepard or Io Manor for the Titans?
I would play him over all of those. Sterling
Okay.
Shepard is really week to week. We've seen Sterling Shepard last year play when both Godwin and Evans were out, and once in a while he'll get some production. Other weeks he'll completely disappear. You cannot count on him unless you are in the deepest of leagues in the most terrible of circumstances. The other players in there were
Io Manor, and then Trey Tucker for the Raiders.
Yeah, Trey Tucker. Look, if you have to shoot for ceiling, you take the chance that Trey Tucker can get a long touchdown. But again, it's rolling the dice. That is like that super upside flex, but the floor is 3 points. And I know he's playing almost all the snaps, but you got to be careful there. So an Io Manor is a nice floor play right now. And like I said earlier in the show, I think he'll become a fully developed product by mid-season. But I think right now with Godwin back, as long as watch the injury reports, make sure the team says what they believe about him. If they say he's a full go, you play him. If he's not, then you go to Io Manor. If they say that he's going to be on a very limited workload coming in, then maybe trust that and play Io Manor.
Well, the Buccaneers said that Emeka Egbuka was going to be on a limited workload last week and ends up still being totally fantasy relevant, which might have hurt a few people here in the office. I've been hearing that for the past couple of days. I still don't trust the Buccaneers dating back to Bruce Arians when Mike Evans was supposed to not play at all for the first week of the season, and then it ended up being like Saturday he was full go and he scores a touchdown and becomes fantasy relevant. So, yeah, I mean, it's a really tough spot to be in. Let's complicate this further because CeeDee Lamb now out likely a month. Sorry, Jerry Jones. I don't care what you have to say. It's a high ankle sprain. You're going to put him on IR. Stop with this baloney. I assume CeeDee Lamb is not going to be playing for at least a month with a high ankle sprain. And frankly, where the Cowboys are at, they probably shouldn't be playing CeeDee Lamb for this duration of the season or having to go out there. George Pickens gets the big bump. Jake Ferguson gets the big bump. Is there anybody else, though, that you would pick up? Because I made the case in the waiver article, it's Cavante Turpin, not Jalen Tolbert. That's probably the one that you should roster. But even then, I don't know if Turpin is either built to be a volume sort of player or can sustain being a volume sort of player for the Cowboys.
So we will see Tolbert play more snaps, but Turpin will be more heavily used. They will get him on some toss sweeps. They'll get him on some gadgety stuff. They'll get him on an occasional shot play. They're going to make use of his touches. He is a very useful player, and defenses really don't know how he's going to be used when he's on the field, so teams don't normally have an answer for him. So I think, if you're in a deep league and it's a desperation move, then I think you make a move at him. Look, George Pickens, the best part of his game is not going to be here now for the next few weeks because defenses now could play a safety over the top, take away the deep pass. But don't forget, George Pickens is played in that terrible Pittsburgh offense where he had to be a short and intermediate receiver, and he was putting up close to 1,000-yard seasons. He is a good player. He's not a bum. And Dallas's good defense is bad. They're going to trail. They're going to throw the ball. George Pickens is going to now have a very high floor. Last week, he did fine. It was like 17.8 PPR points, and that's what he had the prior week. That's fine. But he's going to get a lot of volume here. And he was not a product of CeeDee Lamb. He is a good NFL receiver. He's going to probably get 7 catches in this game. And I would bank on that as a high floor play.
I would actually be comfortable in the same way I'm trading for Jacoby Myers, given the floor, especially with Lamb out for a month. I think I would trade for Pickens too. The only issue is the people who have Pickens, A, liked him coming into this year, and B, also recognize that he's going to get plenty of volume with Lamb out. The only person that I think can stop George Pickens is George Pickens. The only issue, Jim, is I think George Pickens stops George Pickens a lot. And maybe it won't happen this week against the Packers, but if he ends up being frustrated over a 2 or 3 week stretch, something dumb happens, the coaching staff can't rely on him, that hurts you guys fantasy-wise. So that's my only reservation with George Pickens, who, again, I think is going to be an immediate beneficiary with CeeDee Lamb out from a volume part of things, just overall. We did have a question in the chat. There's been a lot of trade-related questions. I would prefer if we answer those on Twitter, JB Fantasy Sports for myself, at Jim Coventry NFL on Twitter, or we have an Ask an Expert feature at RotoWire. YouTube 15 gets you 15% off, and you'll be able to ask those questions, or our Discord. There's a bunch of other places where you can go and dive into that a little bit further from those trade part of things, but Jesse sent us a message. I want to make sure we honor that here. So would you, Jim, trade Javonte Williams, David Montgomery, and Rashee Rice for Bijan Robinson? He goes over his roster, and at least from just a little bit overall look, it'd be Devon Achane and Benson are his 2 starters right now, so Bijan would probably jump over Benson in that scenario. And at receiver, Justin Jefferson, Sutton, Egbuka, and Rashee Rice coming back here in a couple weeks. So would you trade Javonte Williams, Monty, and Rashee Rice for Bijan Robinson?
I think I would, because you have plenty of depth at other positions. And look, Javonte Williams, there's down 2 linemen now. You can see this going downhill in the second half of the season. Montgomery, things have worked out in the short term, but I think his volume is not going to be carryable week to week. Rice is going to be great, but that's a player you got to give up if you want Bijan. I think you go for the gold with Bijan here. You got a great roster. This puts you into a different stratosphere, I think.
Yeah, 14-team half-point PPR. The part that I always, and this is for Rashee Rice conversation overall, you as the fantasy manager who drafts Rashee Rice, I did, I know Jim did in a few places, you are sitting on 6 weeks of a zero. It's also 6 weeks of roster inflexibility, or not flexibility, whatever you want to call it. That's frustrating. To then trade him away, let's just say at week 6 when Rashee Rice comes back, is you taking a negative from a roster perspective. Doing so here in week 4, if it is to get a guy like Bijan Robinson, is part of that. Now, again, the running backs being what they are, Javonte Williams, David Montgomery, in a 14-team league, it's not just you saying, oh, I could have to decide between Javonte and Trey Benson every week and David Montgomery, but you allowing another person to have 2 starting running backs in a deeper format. I might not do that trade. That's right. I might not do that trade only because I don't want to give my other league mates 2 starting running backs and a receiver for a guy like Bijan, who is very comfortably, if he's not a top 3 pick now in redraft, he's certainly near that range as well. I just don't want to give my other league mates that sort of thing. That's the only reason I wouldn't do that. But I appreciate the question, Jesse, and I think it's certainly one that we will go back on. We would go back and forth on for a lot of this stuff too. So, is there any other receiver, Jim, that you want to discuss before we move over to the tight ends?
Terry McLaurin may not play, so nothing much to say about him. Jamar Chase against Denver. I mean, you start him because you have to, and he did get 5 for 50 and a 9-yard rush. I think he fumbled last week, but again, what are you getting here? You know, you're 5 for 50 is the ceiling probably. That probably is the ceiling. I don't know that Cincinnati's gonna be in range to score many touchdowns here. They're not gonna be able to run. This is a disaster road matchup here. But yeah, and obviously I think T. Higgins. Look, I put him at wide receiver at 32. I probably should move him lower. I just don't know how they're gonna move the ball. But maybe they get something going here. Maybe there's gonna be garbage time. But I just buying the Cincinnati receiver group right now. This is tough.
Yeah, and it's a frustrating matchup too. I know the Broncos secondary isn't quite the way we envisioned them entering the year, but they're still really good. Surtain's really good. I think they can really take away a lot of that stuff. I normally love having players on Monday Night Football as like if I just get this, I'll have won my league. I don't know if we can assume that for either one of the Monday Night Football games, so it makes me a little bit nervous if you have Jamar Chase right now. Let's go over the tight ends. We mentioned Jake Ferguson. Now I think it's a massive bump with CeeDee Lamb out for, let's just project at least a month at this point. He's tight end 5 on the list. We have Tyler Warren as tight end 4, Juwan Johnson as tight end 3, and of course the 2 top guys, McBride and Bowers, where they have been drafted. Dalton Kincaid and Mark Andrews are 2, I think, possible high risers in this, and Kincaid now has touchdowns in 2 of the past 3 games. Bills have easily the biggest layup of all the week 4 contests against the Saints. Is this a scenario where you're playing Kincaid and hoping he scores a touchdown? Because if the Bills cover the spread, Kincaid probably isn't involved very much outside of the 1 score.
Again, it's an indictment on the tight end position. Sam Laporta's playing Cleveland here. I don't know what the passing games do. Hawkins had got the touchdown last week, but he hasn't had volume. Goddard had 1 catch last week. It was a touchdown. Great. Maybe Ertz could be higher. But the thing with Dalton Kincaid is that, like you said, he's getting early targets in games. They're going to score a lot of points. If they're blowing out the Saints by covering the point spread, they're scoring 28 points in the first half probably. That means there's a good chance that Kincaid is enough of a part of that at tight end. Because look, at tight end, you get a touchdown, that's your spot. You hit tight end 6 probably, right? So I think really that's all it is. It's kind of a bet on that.
That's why Hunter Henry also is in that mix with the 2 touchdowns from last week for the Patriots. They have a good match against the Panthers. Totally fine with that. We have Sam Laporta a little bit lower on this list. David Njoku and Harold Fannin. There are leagues, Jim, where I am playing Harold Fannin and doing so not with confidence, but kind of like, it's could do a lot worse. It feels like at the tight end position. And for a lot of the guys drafted higher, Evan Ingram, raising hand. Mark Andrews prior to last week would have been the same thing. Fannin was one of those safety nets. So what are you thinking with this Browns matchup against the Lions? Because if it goes the way of last week, Browns completely shut down the Lions, and then there isn't offense overall on either side. But I think the Lions are going to come to play. And then by default, the Browns will have to pass. There might be some underneath stuff there too. So is Fannin a low-end option for you, or kind of having him outside that group?
I put him at tight end 16. We've seen the production go down. Each week he had that great opening game, and then the production just kind of shot down. So after that, was he 763 in the opener, 5 for 48, then 3 for 25. So it's inched down. The targets went from 9 to 5 to 4. So it's a little concern. And you kind of mentioned this, though, with Detroit playing Cleveland. Believe me, Detroit knows that Cleveland knocked off Green Bay. So if they were going to look past them, I don't think they're looking past them now. And the one thing that Detroit does have a lot of talent on defense. And I think that they could really, like the Packers did, I think they could really limit Cleveland moving the ball. Cleveland might struggle to score points. They didn't score a point against the Packers until it kind of got goofy.
Four minutes left in the game. Yes, I'm aware.
It went goofy late. So there's a world where Cleveland might really struggle to score. So betting on any of their players here, that's a tough one.
The other one I'll just mention, I had put Brenton Strange on the waiver wire article as just a low-end option with a volume. Diami Brown was injured during that Jacksonville win over the Texans. Don't know to what degree that Diami Brown will be used more. Parker Washington ended up being the beneficiary, one that happened during the game. Travis Hunter still wasn't. Sorry, guys, who were trying to assume that was going to happen. But Brenton Strange probably is like a 6-target, 40-catch guy, 10 points PPR. It is what it is. Isaiah likely making his season debut for the Ravens against the Chiefs. There was a lot of people drafting Isaiah Likely. I was not among that group. And certainly a lot of people victory lapping the draft after Mark Andrews had his first 2 weeks of the season. Where are you at with Isaiah Likely? What are you kind of assuming for him rest of season?
Isaiah Likely from weeks 2 through 14 last year had one fantasy relevant game. He was normally about 5 PPR points a game in the games or less between weeks 2 and 14. Or maybe week 16 it may have been. But I know at the very end of the season in the NFL playoffs, Likely did really well. And everybody's like, look, here he is. No, Zay Flowers was out. And so Likely took on a really the wide receiver Zay Flowers role, and he ate in those games. This is Mark Andrews' offense. And look, when Likely comes back, it helps Andrews. They need Ricard back because they can run their offense. That's when Andrews gets unlocked downfield. Now, they were able to unlock that last week. But you saw, it's not a matter of Mark Andrews has lost anything. Mark Andrews put up a game that very few tight ends could have.
Right.
So Mark Andrews has Mark Andrews' role. Likely goes back to Likely's role. That's not changing this year. And I look, Alan Soslowski on XM, I called this out Sunday. I go, buy Mark Andrews. Buy him. Mark Andrews is going to be just fine.
Well, he was available on waivers at a certain point. It was very easy to go ahead and buy him, much less trade for him. So kudos to you on that. Yeah.
And here we are. And Alan said, man, we should have put a social media video ahead of time on that. I go, assign it to me.
Of course, Alan's like, we got to profit on this. Come on now, Jim is the giving us all the correct takes. We got to make sure we capitalize. No, I agree with you on that. Overall, I think that does it for us on today's Wednesday weekly rankings here with Jim Coventry. Of course, you could see these rankings throughout the whole show. You can go back and watch the video. Code YouTube 15 gets you 15% off the the RotoWire subscription side of things. You can do the Ask an Expert I referred to earlier in terms of these trades. You can reach out to me on Twitter, JB Fantasy Sports. You can reach out to Jim at Jim Coventry NFL as well too. But more importantly, Jim, when do you do the Sunday start sit stuff? You spend a lot of time going over that on this very channel.
Yeah, the start sit show, the stream is 2 hours before kickoff every Sunday, before the main slate kicks off. Obviously, there's a London game this week. But the other thing is I do answer questions on X 3 days a week. I answer them Monday if you have waivers questions, anytime Monday. I answer questions on Thursday if you got lineup questions for Thursday night or early questions. And then on Saturdays till 3 Eastern. So if you have lineup questions on X, send them at those. It's Tuesday, Thursday, first half of Saturday, and we're good. Otherwise, you got to join the stream. Catch me there.
There you go. All right. We're going to sign off here. We'll be back in next Wednesday. Thanks, everyone, for listening along and at least paying along in the comments, too. You've been fantastic. Appreciate all the interest here, and back in next week.